Hello and welcome back to my channel. After 2 months since my last video, I'm finally back with a new video, and as promised, after 2 months, here we are. This is Normal People by Sally Rooney. I've read it. I have a lot of things to say about it, so this is probably going to be a pretty long video. I know it took me 2 months to do this video. It didn't take me 2 months to read the book. As you can see, it's kind of it's quite short and it's easy to read. It's easy to get through it, so if you are looking for an easy read, this would be one of my recommendations. But with my busy schedule and with everything going on, exams and work and all of that, YouTube stuff is very low on the priority list, even though I like it. So that's the reason why it took me so long. I've also filmed this video a week ago and I didn't like it. I thought it was too chaotic, so I had to rewrite the script, and now I'm filming it a second time. Just so you know, I have the laptop with the script here. I'm not going to read off the script because I don't like to do that and I think that would be boring. But you will see me occasionally looking down to make sure I'm on track, because I can easily get into digressions, and I want this video to be focused and well structured. Let's get into the video. As an introduction, I will say, if you watched some of my other videos, that aren't many, you could probably see that I am a person who really loves classics. So the bulk of my readings involve dead authors that write thick and complicated books. I would say my soft spot is 19th century and beginning of the 20th century novels. So those are some of my favorites, and my favorite authors wrote in those periods. So it's just what I naturally gravitate towards. That being said, when you want to be involved in the literary world, as I want to, obviously, I have a YouTube channel dedicated to this, but not only that, I'm following other people and I want to be involved in what is happening now. I came to this realization that I had a pretty good knowledge of dead authors and almost no knowledge of contemporary authors. So that led me to my quest to find contemporary books that I like as much as I do classics. I'll put classics in quotation marks because this word has different meanings and can mean different things for a lot of people. For me, a classic, or for a novel to be considered a classic, it has to be revolutionary and unique, and it has to say something about the essence of humanity. I think that's how I would put it. So it has to be written well, and at the same time have a powerful impact on you and say something impactful or deep or meaningful about humanity. So I have my classics, my books written by dead authors that I love, that fulfill this criteria. But then I started my search of what some people might call modern classics. I think the term modern classic is a bit of a paradox, because for a classic to gain this status, I think there needs to be some time passing so people can look at it in hindsight and see that it was actually relevant or impactful for that period of time. So I don't think that we, living in this time, we can accurately predict or pick out those works of literature that are going to be considered classics in 100 years' time. That being said, of course, people love to speculate, people love tags, marketing teams love these kinds of words that grab your attention. So I'm going to use the term modern classic for lack of a better word. But what I am looking for is not necessarily a classic, but a contemporary novel that can be held to the same standards of novels like Crime and Punishment, Mrs. Dalloway, and so on. So that's a little bit of my background when it comes to reading these contemporary books. So it's not purely for entertainment, not that there's anything wrong with that, but I have also this search. You might say it's my fault for falling for marketing strategies. Maybe, but at the same time, when you hear a book being so praised, you start to think that maybe there is some truth to that. Yes, I'm a bit skeptical of marketing campaigns, naming novels, this and that, but at the same time, with books like Normal People, it's not only the marketing. So it was praised by its publishers and by readers alike. So I don't think I was naive believing that and taking that to heart. Taking into account what I've told you about my quest of finding a modern classic, it is safe to say that with Normal People, my expectations were pretty high. Now, I don't think the book is necessarily bad. It does have some qualities, and I think Rooney has potential as a writer. But it is safe to say I don't think it's a classic. In my opinion, I don't think that people in 100 years' time will say that this book reflects an essence of humanity or an essence of our generation. I just think it's a romance book, YA book, that's pretty well written. I would probably recommend it to a teenager, but definitely not what some might consider a classic. Let's get into the summary. So there will be spoilers in this video. But the summary part is going to be spoiler-free. The story is not necessarily unique, but it's an interesting setting that has a lot of potential. The story follows our two protagonists, Connell and Marianne, from the end of high school until the end of college. They have a complicated relationship, and we follow them. They're growing up, basically. They're becoming adults because they're in this transitional period between adolescence and adulthood, as they're trying to discover themselves, to understand themselves and understand each other. We also see their relationship evolving and changing as they change themselves. As they make this transition between teenagehood and adulthood, they keep getting together and breaking up. Their relationship is undefined both by the characters and the narrator, which I think reflects how the characters themselves are still undefined, because at the end of the day they are growing. So as they learn more and more about themselves and about each other, their relationship is also constantly changing. So for that reason, they never say they're boyfriend or girlfriend or friends. It is fluid. Everything is fluid with them, which I found interesting and accurate, because at that age it's difficult to have a stable and clear relationship. There's always uncertainty and instability. Besides this normal degree of confusion and uncertainty that is characteristic of adolescence and of any transitional period, the two characters also have backgrounds that intensify the instability. On one hand, we have Connell, who is raised by his mother. We're told that his mother had him as a teenager, and she comes from a bad family. We're not told exactly why or what is bad about them. He doesn't have a traditionally stable family. That being said, his mother chooses to keep him, to raise him, and does her best in spite of all of her efforts. And while Connell does grow up to be a well-adjusted teen, he carries with him the burden of his family's background, which inevitably reflects into how he relates to other people. Marianne, on the other hand, also comes from a one-parent household. We're told her father is dead. We don't know exactly why. As opposed to Connell's family, which is poor, Marianne's family is really rich. It's considered a good family. That being said, Marianne's family is clearly dysfunctional. We're shown and we're told that her father was abusive, her mother doesn't love her, and her brother becomes abusive too. So we have these two characters in kind of opposite situations, but with some common ground between them, enough that it will create an attraction between them, because of course they need to be different, but at the same time they need to have something in common in order to come together. The whole story, I would say, can be summarized by this push-pull interaction between Marianne and Connell. As they grow up, as they go through college, they keep getting together and breaking up for different reasons. The ending, without spoiling it, but I'll say it's left hanging. And I've seen some people complaining about that. As far as I'm concerned, I think that was a good choice and the best choice for the novel, because since the novel ends at the end of college, It's not like you become a full person and a full adult at the end of college. Some people might even say that the struggle only starts at the end of college. So it makes sense for the novel to have a kind of an open ending and have the two characters be in this position of, while they've had some growth and while they come to understand some things about the world and about themselves, there's still the whole world open in front of them, and there's so much more to understand. I personally liked that. That being said, there's another problem I have with the ending, and that I think undermines any good thing about the novel, but we'll get to that. Moving on, I will give it to Rooney. I think her two protagonists are pretty well developed. There's a lot of things to say about them. There's a lot of layers to both their inner and their outer conflicts. They have backgrounds that are relevant to how they act and interact with other people. So that is something that I liked and enjoyed about the novel. On the other hand, the side characters are generally quite uninteresting, especially Marianne's family. Connell's mother, we do get to see her and kind of see her complexity. When it comes to Marianne's family, they are almost sketches of abusive people. So that I thought was a bit of a shame, because I would have liked to see a bit more of Marianne's mother, since the characters mirror each other so much. We have a pretty good view of Connell's mother. I would have expected the same to be done with Marianne's mother, and have also them be opposites of each other. So having a mother that loves her child and despite her material difficulties does her best to raise him, and then a mother who has all the financial resources she might need, isn't able to raise her daughter. But alas, that wasn't done, and there are other characters that are there just to be there. They don't really have much personality. Now, granted, it's a short book. It's no Dostoevsky, and it's not like I expected the side characters to be as developed as the main ones, but a little bit more. That being said, this was my general view of the characters. Let's get into the protagonist himself, and I'll start with Connell. At first glance, Connell is the kind of teenager that has everything going for him. So he's popular in school, he has a lot of friends, he's good at school, but he's also good at sports, everybody likes him. So he's a teenager that has everything going for him, except for the fact that he comes from poor and so to say bad family. Given that they come from a small town with a very tight community, appearances are really important, and they are really important especially to Connell. And as we get to know him better, we understand that the reason why he cares so much about it is because he wants to prove people wrong. He is deeply aware of how his mother's situation is seen with disdain by other people, and there is the prejudice that a teenage mom cannot create a stable environment in order to raise a well-adjusted child. So Connell sets out to prove people wrong. He sets out to disprove the prejudices, and that's why he cares so much about the way he's seen by his peers. But that being said, while he seems to fit in on the surface, he doesn't have a deep connection and a relationship with his not with his mom, but with his friends. He cannot really be vulnerable with them, and we see that in the beginning of the novel when we're being told that one of his teachers is flirting with him, and even if this makes him uncomfortable, he doesn't admit this in front of his classmates because he knows they'll make fun of him for it. So there are things that he isn't comfortable sharing with them. So we get the sense that yes, he fits in, yes, people like him, but at the same time, he's not truly himself with others. While this is not obvious from the beginning of the novel, in the second half, when he goes to therapy, he says this to his therapist, and I'll read from my script. I would say in school, I sometimes had that feeling of isolation or whatever. So we see that while, yes, he belongs to that community and he felt part of it, at the same time, he didn't feel truly connected to his peers. He still felt isolated because he couldn't be completely honest and vulnerable with them. Because of this, I think the general descriptions that I've heard and from the reviews I've read get a very core issue wrong with Connell's character, because as I said, while he is well adjusted, it is not because of his innate personality, but it is because of his constant attempt to prove the world that his mother is a good parent despite of the less than ideal family situation that he grew up in. So it's not that he wants to be popular, but he feels like he needs to do it in order to clean the image of himself and of his mother too. This is also why, in my opinion, Connell will keep struggling building a relationship with Marianne, because Marianne doesn't care at all about what other people think and isn't concerned with cleaning her image. The community already has a somewhat good opinion of her family because they're rich. So when it comes to her, there's nothing for her to gain from upholding her family's image. Quite the contrary, given that her family treats her poorly, you might assume that the reason why she's so indifferent to the other bad opinion of her is because she wants to prove to the world that her family is a bad family. So we have Connell, who comes from a bad family, who wants to prove that he's actually from a good family, and Marianne, who comes from what other people might think a good family, rich family, who wants to prove that they actually didn't do anything for her and they don't deserve their status despite their material worth. I think this is where their conflict stems from. While they have a lot in common because they are both misunderstood and they both feel isolated in different ways, so that's what brings them together. They have this, which is not the only one, don't get me wrong, but I think this is the seed of the misunderstandings that will keep appearing in their relationship. After they finish high school and go to college, the roles kind of reverse somewhat. Marianne becomes a popular one and Connell struggles to find his friends, but taking into account what I've said previously, that Connell already didn't really truly have friends back at home, it's not necessarily that the roles reverse, but since they're in a new environment and in an unfamiliar one, they are on equal footing. For Connell, there is no longer that comfort and familiarity he had back at home, where he knew other people knew him, they liked him, and so on. He is on the same ground as Marianne. They both have to, in a way, make a name for themselves in this new environment they find themselves in. And while Connell finds it difficult because he's not used to doing it, he's not used to people not knowing him, not liking him, Marianne has nothing to lose. She was an outcast at home. Now the situation for her is improved because there's no longer people who dislike her and talk behind her back and so on. So there's not really a role reversal. We just get to see them out of their hometown and in a different environment. And in Connell's case, we get to see him out of his comfort zone, which is his hometown. A true role reversal would mean for Connell to take the place Marianne had back at home. But he doesn't become an outcast. It's difficult for him to find people to relate to because he feels like his classmates are snobs. He doesn't feel like he can have a meaningful conversation with them. But there's nobody who hates him. He does have some friends. He does get invited to parties. So he doesn't have that social stigma that Marianne had back at home. So the role reversal isn't really a role reversal. It's just a change in environment and ultimately a change in how the characters are going to interact with that environment, which is only natural. Facing these new circumstances, Connell is left building a new identity without the comfort of his hometown, which he obviously struggles with because he doesn't really know what he wants and doesn't know what to pursue. On one hand, he desires to be liked like he was back at home. He strives towards this social status and this good image. But at the same time, he is attracted and he is pulled towards Marianne, who stays true to the initial, let's say, portrayal of a character, that being she doesn't care about what other people think. So even though she becomes popular, even though she makes friends, she doesn't have Connell's desire to work towards maintaining that. So obviously Connell struggles and he will go back and forth between getting with Marianne and living in kind of their own bubble, isolated from society in a way, and then realizing that he actually wants to be part of society, he wants to be a normal person and strive towards that. So that's his main conflict. A quote that summarizes Connell's character really well, that we get at the beginning of the novel, is: Connell always gets what he wants, and then he feels sorry for himself when what he wants doesn't make him happy. He seeks a relationship with Marianne because of the intimacy they have and because of the vulnerability he can show towards her. He gets in a relationship, and then he realizes he doesn't really want that. He goes towards the other end. He seeks a relationship with a girl that is normal, and he can feel part of the normal people. But then he realizes he doesn't feel good in that spot as well. So there is this constant figuring out of what he actually wants. We get towards the end of the novel and he still doesn't really know, which I think it's not necessarily a bad thing, because we're left with the sense, or at least I was left with the sense, that he learned something from this, and he kind of accepted the fact that he's never going to be quote-unquote normal. A little digression before we get to Marianne. Ultimately, I think this is the purpose of the novel and why it's called Normal People, to show that even if Marianne and Connell are not normal from a lot of different reasons, you get to the conclusion that in reality nobody is truly normal, because everybody has situations that will make them stand out from the others. Getting back to our analysis, let's get into Marianne's character. Like I've mentioned before, because it's difficult to talk about one protagonist without the other, since a lot of their characterizations comes from their relationship. Marianne is in some way the opposite of Connell. So she comes from a rich family that hate her. In their hometown, she's a complete outcast. She has no friends. People speculate a lot about her. They start rumors about her. Nobody wants to be her friend. And more than that, being seen with her can impact your own social status. So for that reason, when they first get together while they're still in high school, Connell completely ignores her when they're at school. Marianne's family, in opposition to Connell's family, is cruel to her. I've already mentioned that her mother doesn't love her, doesn't show any concern for her well-being. Her brother, on top of that, is also physically abusive. So mirroring Connell's attempt at proving that his mother is a good parent and is able to raise him well, when it comes to Marianne, she proves that in spite of belonging to a family who has all the material resources to offer a child the best life they can have, they fail at that. This leads us into a class conflict. Connell's mom is a cleaner for Marianne's family, so it is mentioned, but I'm not going to dwell too much on it because the author herself doesn't really give too much attention to it. It's just dropped from time to time, but if you were to take it out, the story wouldn't change in an essential way, in my opinion. Anyway, getting back to Marianne, as she is shown allowing other people to mistreat her, allowing people to talk badly about her, we get the sense that she has a very low self-esteem. She doesn't think highly of herself. Marianne's background is reflected in how she lets other people treat her. She lets people at school treat her badly and doesn't try to do anything about it. And while you get in the first part of the novel the sense that she just doesn't care what other people think about her, she just and does her own thing, as we learn more and more about her, we understand that it's not that she doesn't care, it's that she believes that she deserves to be treated this way. So her family treated this way, why would other people treat her better? And why would she deserve better? Since she was constantly surrounded by these mistreatments, it's the natural conclusion to draw for a child that they must deserve the treatment they get. So this is the essence of Marianne's struggle. She needs to find her self-worth. While we could be tempted to claim that Marianne finally finds her friends and social circle in college, That of course doesn't reflect reality, and it rather reflects Connell's situation in high school, because yes, she is popular, she has people to hang out with and to socialize with. It's the same sense of isolation that we get with Connell. There's nobody she can truly be vulnerable with. Not to mention that while not outwardly rude, people treat her badly. Her boyfriend is very possessive, and one of her friends, Peggy, justifies her boyfriend's behavior by saying that this is how men act anyway, and that Jamie is actually one of the good ones, because it could be much worse. What drives Marianne towards Connell is the fact that Connell is the only one, or one of the few people, who actually treats her well. He shows interest in what she feels like. He shows that he cares about her pleasure, about her well-being. He shows affection, and Marianne is seeking that and clinging on to that. So while she doesn't think she deserves to be treated well, of course she wants to be loved. She wants to know that people care about her, and she gets that in Connell. Now, this setup and their relationship, the setup, the conflict, as I said, I think it's well built and well developed, because as you can see, there are a lot of layers to the characters and to their relationship. There are a lot of reasons why they are attracted to each other, and a lot of reasons why they cannot be together. For one, going back to the idea that Marianne is clinging on to the affection that Connell shows her. You could say she's just trying to compensate for everything that her family didn't offer her. Well, that's a lot of pressure to put on a teenage relationship. And we can understand why Connell feels uncomfortable. While we're not told that, we could assume, and I wouldn't say, and I think the book supports it, we can understand why Connell feels uncomfortable and overwhelmed with Marianne's relationship, at least when they break up for the second time. Everything I've said so far is more or less praising the novel. I didn't say anything that I didn't like about it. Quite the contrary, you see that I had a lot to say about the characters, which I love, but I would say my praise stops here with Marianne's character, because while Marianne is a well-developed character, I couldn't help noticing, in some ways, I think Marianne could be considered a manic pixie dream girl. What I mean by that is that we can find in Marianne's character stereotypes that are present in a lot of other works that people would consider harmful. And this starts with, which is less important, but it was annoying, with her appearance, because we're told at the beginning of the book that she's not beautiful, which I thought was interesting, because you don't have the traditionally plain girl that everybody falls in love to. Just to discover that everything she needed was a bit of makeup and some nice clothes, and all of a sudden everybody thinks she's actually really beautiful. So that was one thing that annoyed me. Then we have some eating disorders that are implied but not really tackled or addressed. We're told Marianne is skinny, we're told she gets skinnier. There are a lot of scenes where she doesn't have an appetite, or we're being told about how she doesn't eat a lot, if at all. But this is not presented as an issue. Not to mention her interest in politics, because at some point we're told that she's not like other girls. She wakes up, she doesn't eat, and just reads about the main political conflicts in the world and all of that. But this interest doesn't really add anything to her character. So it's not relevant. If you take out that, she remains the same character. So then I can't help but think that it was added just to make her sound more interesting without really adding anything. Now, the main problem I have with the novel and with how it was created is that even if we're led to believe that there are two protagonists, and their development and their growth is meant to mirror each other and to be balanced, let's say, there is a huge imbalance between how they are treated, in my point of view. This imbalance becomes painfully obvious with the end of the novel. I'll read directly from the book, because it's the very last line. As a context, Connell gets an opportunity to leave for the US and continue his studies there. and he is with Marianne. They're discussing this and whether or not he should go. Connell says he doesn't want to go without her. You get the sense that they've finally managed to overcome the struggles they've encountered in their relationship, and they're finally together. And Marianne, to all this, Marianne says, "You should go," she says. "I'll always be here. You know that." This leaves the two characters in two very different positions and very imbalanced positions. They are both smart. They are both in good universities. They both have potential to grow and to become successful. On one hand, you have Connell, who gets this opportunity and he's interested in pursuing and developing his potential. And then on the other hand, you get Marianne, who is not interested at all in that, and she just tells him, "I'll always be here," further suggesting the fact that she'll stay in the same place for him. There's no growth for her to do. There's nothing for her to pursue. There's no success for her to have in her career or even in her personal life. She's just there to stay here, to stay in the same spot for Connell to come back. Safe to say, this made me quite mad, because why do we need another novel who shows the girl with a great potential waiting for a guy? Now, Connell might be the best guy, but still, why do we need her to stay here for Connell? Why can't they be on the same foot? Why can't you have them both leave and again say goodbye to each other, or only for us to imagine how they come back together after years and so on? This imbalance, while painfully obvious in this last line, it is present all throughout the novel in how they interact with each other. Even if we look at the first scene and how the relationship starts, Connell feels comfortable sharing his struggles with Marianne. He tells her about the teacher that's flirting with him. He feels safe sharing this uncomfortable situation the teacher is putting him in, and Marianne is there to comfort him. Marianne is there to reassure him. The relationship at the beginning and throughout the novel is very much on Connell's terms. Connell is the one who decides when to see Marianne and when to ignore her. On the other hand, though, Marianne doesn't even think about saying hi to Connell in the school hallway and potentially ruining his image. She accepts his terms for the relationship, but that cannot be said for Connell, because Connell is the one who imposes the terms of the relationship. He's the one who chooses when to leave. He's the one who chooses when to come back. Marianne is just there to respond to him. So there isn't a real back and forth. It's just Marianne just sits here and is struggle. Connell comes, she feels happier for a moment, and then Connell leaves, she feels sad again. She gets together with a boyfriend that treats her badly and abuses her. Then Connell comes to save her, and so on. So Marianne constantly puts her worth in Connell, which for the beginning is not a bad thing. Like we've discussed, her background kind of makes us expect her to act this way. But then you'd expect, as the novel grows, you'd expect her to at least try to find her self-worth within herself and build relationships outside of Connell that improve her self-esteem and self-worth. But that's not the case at all. If you were to assume a continuation to the end, we can probably assume that she'll get together with another abusive boyfriend while she waits for Connell to come back from the US. Another great imbalance you get is how mental health is treated with the two characters. Because I didn't mention it because I didn't think it was relevant, but at some point there's an episode when Connell finds out that one of his ex-high school classmates killed himself. Because of that, he starts suffering from depression, which leads him to seek help at the university council, leads him to seek help from a psychiatrist and get treatment. He breaks up with his girlfriend at that time and then goes back to Marianne, who helps him get over this difficulty he has. On the other hand, when Marianne struggles, and she clearly struggles, she struggles throughout the novel, one could say her problems are much more deeply rooted than Connell's, because she was raised in such an abusive household. When she struggles, Connell doesn't do much for her. Granted, she doesn't ask for help, but Connell doesn't really step up. When we're told she doesn't eat, she gets really skinny, she looks really tired, Connell sees her and his thoughts aren't about how he's concerned for his friend. She just thinks how she actually likes her even more now that she sees her so skinny and so tired. While this book has a lot of good things about it, this core issue ruins it all. Because what's the point of building these two characters in this relationship if you're just going to further this idea that the guy is going out there and pursuing his career while the girl is sitting in one spot and waiting for him to come and save her. This is what you're left with, I think, with that last line. I'll always be here for you. I'll always be in the same spot. I'm not going to do any kind of development on my own because I need you to come and help me and save me. The last thing I didn't like about this book, which is not as upsetting as what I've just said, but it was still annoying, is that the style is a bit all over the place in my opinion, and there are multiple reasons for that. One of it is that I feel like in some descriptions Rooney gives us too many details. I can understand why she wants to give us small details about what the characters are doing, where they're looking, what they're doing with their hands, and so on, because it's relevant for the characters, and it also reflects the story. At the end of the day, the story is called Normal People, so we do expect to see the mundaneness of everyday life in a way, and these details do add to that. But there are some details that just aren't necessary, and I'll give you an example with a scene. Context is Connell, Marianne, and Peggy are at Marianne's apartment. Connell feels kind of uncomfortable because he doesn't like Peggy, and they just sit there, talk and drink some beer. And we get this paragraph. It's short, so I'll read it to you. The last corner of the label peels off Connell's beer bottle now. It comes off more easily when the bottle is very cold, because the condensation dissolves the glue. He puts the beer on the table and starts to fold the label up into a small square. Peggy goes on talking, but it doesn't seem important to listen to her. So I get why Rooney wants to tell us that he peels off the tag and starts playing with it, because that shows discomfort, that gives us a sense of anxiety or boredom. I think most of us have done this with the tag from a bottle. So it's relatable. What I don't understand is this part. It comes off more easily when the bottle is very cold because the condensation dissolves the glue. What does it add to the scene? It just feels like a brag. A brag that Rooney knows why it's easier to peel the tag from a cold and wet bottle. And there are other examples like that in the novel. So details added just for the sake of adding details, but that don't add anything to the scene itself. Because if you take it out, you don't lose anything from this paragraph. Another problem I have with Rooney's style is that at times when it's meant to be really intense, it feels kind of like stage directions. So you can see the picture in your mind. You can imagine how that would look on a screen and would convey this intense emotions, but on the page it doesn't really work. And I have an example of that too, although again there are multiple in the novel. So this is the scene after Marianne is groped at the ball. So a guy a guy gropes her, he touches her breasts, and she is very uncomfortable, obviously, and storms off. And this is part of the scene after she storms off, so she's alone in the hallway, and this is what we get. She walks a few steps toward the door on the left and then puts her back against the wall and starts sliding down towards the seated position on the floor. Her breast is aching where the man grabbed it. He wasn't joking, he wanted to hurt her. She's on the floor now, hugging her knees against her chest. You can picture it really clearly, but I think this sequence would be much more impactful if you would see it. If you see someone in distress leaning against the wall and then sliding down, you get the intensity of their emotion. But now on the paper, it doesn't convey a lot. The style of the narration, I would say, is kind of messy, And another problem I have with it, and I've seen a lot of people complaining about it, and I do agree with them, is the lack of dialogue demarcations. A thing that Rooney does in this novel that I like, but I forgot the name of, is that she combines the narrator's voice with the character's thoughts. So you get that thing when you have narrator telling you what's happening, and then all of a sudden it jumps to what the character is thinking without any warning. So you don't have things like she was thinking. It's just the next sentence is the character's thoughts without any warning. Now, I liked this because it makes the book more personal without having it be in first person. Because obviously, if you have two protagonists, it would be difficult to have a first person narration. You have to constantly switch back and forth, which could become tiring and confusing. So having this strategy of giving the character's thoughts as the narration is a good way to give this personal touch to the novel without first-person narration. That being said, this is pretty confusing for the reader, of course, since you don't get any warning. It takes some time to figure out that you're actually reading the character's thoughts and not the narrator. And now going back to the messiness of the style, normally a very good author would write the narrator voice and the character's thoughts in different styles, so you can feel the difference not only through the message but through how it's written. That wasn't done in this novel, but I wouldn't say that's such a big deal. Anyway, it does make the novel kind of confusing at times because you don't really know if what you get is the objective perception of the narrator or is what the characters think and how they perceive the world. Now, to add onto this, dialogue that isn't demarcated adds an extra layer of confusion that isn't necessary at all, because it's not like the dialogue is combined with the narration and you have this flow like you have with the thoughts. So there's a constant flow between narration and thoughts. You have dialogue demarcations because you have she said this, she sighed and then said this. So why not also add the quotation marks? I think it was done for the book to seem more pretentious and potentially make it a bit difficult to read, because if people think a book is difficult to read, then they'll think it must be good. All in all, after this very long video, is Sally Rooney's Normal People a bad book? I don't think so. It has good qualities, it has good protagonists, interesting conflicts, and things you can talk about, so it's not a waste of time reading it. But at the same time, is it a classic? Well, in my opinion, no. Only if you think a classic is a book that perpetuates outdated ideas about how men and women should relate to each other. But otherwise, I was really disappointed at how Marianne's character was treated and how her development was much more dependent on Connell as opposed to Connell's development being dependent on Marianne. As an extra, something that I was thinking, and I'm mentioning here because I think it's a bit of a stretch, but I'll mention it because maybe you thought about it, is that I was thinking, is Rooney trying to tell us a cautionary tale? Because like I've said, there are some hints towards class conflicts and class inequality and unfairness, because you have Connell, who is really smart and really good, but he doesn't get the same opportunities as Marianne, in a sense, because he still gets to go to university. It's not like we truly see him not getting the same opportunity, but still Rooney kind of hints to that he doesn't get the same opportunities as Marianne, and which led me to think, does she develop Marianne the way she did as a cautionary tale to showcase that rich families are actually bad families? Because you could interpret it this way: poor families are poor but they are better because they love their children, while rich families just abuse their children. So it's just a thought. Again, I know it might be a bit of a stretch, but it's something that I was thinking of, given how Connell gets to pursue his professional career and he's interested in it, and Marianne isn't. So ultimately, Marianne even in Rooney's view, Marianne is a failure, which which breaks my heart, because I think Marianne is an interesting female character with an interesting conflict. And I haven't even mentioned her, I haven't even mentioned the hints to BDSM and all of that, because there's just too much to say. But I did like Marianne overall as a character. I could relate to her in some way, especially with being an outcast and being bullied and not having friends, and people thinking that if they're friends with you, then they won't get other friends. I found some of her struggles really relatable, and I wanted her to be as developed as Connell, but seeing the treatment she got from the writer, I just couldn't overlook it. And I think ultimately this book is nothing new because of that. It perpetuates the same harmful stereotypes that we've seen in so many books and so many movies and so on. This was all from me after a long video. I feel like I haven't covered everything I had to say about the novel, but I did cover the main things. Unfortunately, Normal People, not one of the books that I'll add to my classics list, but not a bad book either. It has potential, but it does suffer from perpetuating harmful stereotypes about girls and women. I must say, when I read this novel, I really enjoyed it, because I was in one of those moods when I felt nostalgic for high school. So this helped me kind of relieve my high school years. But then once I got to actually writing the script and analyzing it, everything went downhill. Thank you for watching. If you've reached this end of the video, I truly appreciate it. And I'd love to hear your opinion in the comments, if you care to leave me a comment. So whether you agree or disagree, I'm more than happy to see what you think, because obviously I love discussing books with people. That's why I post things publicly on YouTube. So if you care to, and if you have opinions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'm not going to make any promises for my next video, because I really don't know what I want to do, and I have a lot of things to do. So my next video is gonna be when it's gonna be. Maybe I'll continue my quest to find a modern classic. And if you think you've discovered a modern classic, feel free to leave me your recommendations in the comments as well. I'm interested to see what other contemporary books could be considered modern or future classics. Now, that being said, thank you for watching. I was Delia. This was my opinion on Normal People by Sally Rooney. And until next time, I wish you good luck and goodbye.